Dispatching all biters. My quest to free the country of zombies. Mystic Alchemist. Copyright 2020 Mystic Alchemist. All rights reserved. Written in Australian English. This book is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places and incidents are either a product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual people living or dead, events or locales is purely coincidental. Chapter 6. Overpass. My decision was that I would be safer traveling back on the main highways. More abandoned vehicles to hide mine. More places to stop, and more enemy to avoid too, but overall it was better than being a sitting duck in a lonely narrow country road. I traveled slowly now, watching all directions including up, windows down both sides and navigator prompting me the way. There were 2 more small towns before I came back to the highway, both of them empty and no other traffic. That changed as soon as I hit the interstate with another line of pale cream trucks with black uniformed drivers speeding along the deserted highway. I'd pulled off the road so they ignored me, but I was certainly interested in what was inside them. So curious in fact I spent the rest of my time working out how to capture one. Maybe I'd watched too many action movies, but the only idea that came to mind involved an overpass over the highway and a jump down to the top of the truck. To make that work I needed to find an overpass. That only took half an hour to find one that seemed suitable and a little way further along to find a good place to hide my car. Emptying my backpack on the seat, I filled it with some water, food and chocolate. Then a screwdriver in my belt and folding knife, and with my trusty fire axe in hand I began walking back to that overpass, trying to work out the next part of my plan as I walked. This overpass was only a local 2-lane road crossing the main highway. For the first time, I came across an accident on that bridge. 2 cars had hit head-on, and a third had run into the back of the mess, all 3 vehicles with infected inside. This was more like I expected from the game, and I knew how to handle that easily, using my axe to smash the glass and smashing those inside. It made the car interior messy with splatter, but it stopped the hissing and moaning. Now with some peace, I looked over the side of the overpass to the highway below. It was a bigger jump than I thought. Time for plan B. If I couldn't leap from the bridge and control the truck, maybe I could use something else to do the job for me, one of those cars for example. Even a small car launching over the side of the bridge would slow anything driving underneath. That idea was scratched once I'd studied the thickness of the concrete of the bridge side. Waist high and over a foot thick. No car was going to break through that easily. Time for plan C. What would a truck driver do if an infected splattered on his windscreen? I know it would make me stop. What if I used several infected? More gore and more chance of him stopping. Plan C would work. It took me an hour to get all the infected to one pile on the side of the overpass. They were not all that light, and I hadn't chopped with the thought of removing these bodies from the cars. One of the cars had a rope in the trunk, and that gave me the idea for the next part, stringing the infected up by their legs over the side of the bridge. Then one blow with my axe would sever all the ropes and drop the infected down to splatter the cab of the truck, with any luck. There was only one uncertainty in this plan so far. I couldn't be sure what direction the next lot of trucks would come and what lane they would use. I realized that if I could find something to block a couple of lanes I would increase my chances of success, but I was beat from all the work of setting this plan up so far. For now I sat under the side of the bridge snacking on a rum and raisin chocolate bar to get my strength back. I had plenty of time to explore the smashed cars. Nothing much for me, but every vehicle did have a cell phone and charger, all with dead batteries. 3 more to add to my bait collection, but then I had a better idea. The last car seemed to have suffered the least damage, and when I was removing the charger from the cigarette lighter I saw the charger was still working. If the phone was plugged in and the phone turned on, would I be setting a signal for those black uniforms to attack? Maybe they'll use a missile and bring the bridge down. Something to try before I left. It could be exciting. 6 infected ended up dangling over the bridge side, all held up by rope around their feet, the other end tied in one bunch to a wrecked car, just waiting for a slash with a sharp axe to send them on their journey downward. As time passed, I kept fiddling with the dropping place of the infected bodies, trying to make sure at least one would land on a target whatever lane they decided to use. It was dark before there was any action, and that was a pickup with machine gun same as I'd seen last night, spotlight scanning the sides of the roadway. They must be clearing the way, but at least there was no shooting after they passed. Then a line of headlights ahead. I'd decided to target the last truck, hoping the rest would keep going. The real problem was working exactly when to release my zombie bombs. The trucks were moving pretty fast and close together, and I desperately wanted it to work after all this time and effort. 6 trucks. The first was passed before I realized, then the next and the next. Finally I had the axe in place and just guessed, slashing at the ropes and seeing them snaking over the side of the bridge and leaving me looking over the side to see them fall. It was a wide spread but too early. One body landing before the driver's side front wheel and another hitting in front of the truck bonnet, but the glass was completely clear. Failure. Behind me there was a squeal of brakes and I ran to the other side of the bridge to see what I'd missed. That last truck was stopped and the driver was getting out. He moved around the front of the truck and looked down at something. Maybe part of my infected had stopped his motor, but that didn't let me see what was in the back. Make more chaos, I thought, and went to the bait cell phone I'd planned and plugged it in, waiting and then holding the button until it finally started to initiate. Then I ran hunched down across the bridge. Not away but toward the stopped truck. Trying to see how close I could get, with the crazy idea forming to open the back door while the driver was looking at the front. I never got there. He was back in the cab and moving off before I got close. When I finally got to where the truck had stopped, there were bits of body everywhere. It looked as if a leg had caught in the front based on its position. Nothing else to do but to take the long walk back to where my car was hidden. I was close to there when the beating thrum of a helicopter had me searching the night sky for lights. Absolutely no sight of lights, but the noise was coming closer and closer. They must be flying on night camera and my body heat will paint a big bullseye on their screen. I was all out of ideas. This whole escapade had taken so much and I'd gained so little. There was nowhere to hide. All I could think was to lie still on the side of the road and pretend I was an infected. Lying on my back so I could watch the copter, I saw its silhouette pass me only a few car heights above the road. No indication of them stopping until they were at the overpass, then the motor noise changed with the beating slowing. Maybe they're landing to investigate that phone I'd set as bait. All I knew was they would soon be looking for whoever made that attempted ambush, and lying on the road was not a good hiding place for an enemy with a machine gun. With the whooshing of the chopper still winding down, I got up and sprinted toward the car. It was further than I wanted and I was puffing strongly, but no time for anything but to worm my whole body under the bottom of my car. My thinking was the car had been off for hours and the motor should be too cold to register on their screen, and if I stayed underneath the car, the mass of the car body would mask the heat of my body. At least I was lying, and that was helping me relax from my run and the excitement. It also gave me time to reflect on my foolishness. If someone took notice, they would find a series of incidents like this all in a line heading west. I'd been giving them my destination and speed. Anyone with half a brain would be able to work out the general area where I would strike next. I considered 2 antidotes to that. Change my route and do an attack either north or south to guide them off the way, or make no more attacks and leave them guessing if I was still alive. That helicopter idling in the distance was all the noise around, no shooting and no other vehicles. I hit my head on the metal of the floor pan when the chopper came back, its rotors blasting cold air at me and the noise hurting my ears, but it wasn't stopping, just flying off into the distance. I also realized that I must have been asleep because I definitely couldn't remember hearing the helicopter starting up and coming close, and that made it easy for me to decide to stay where I was and try to sleep some more. I woke in pain. Every part of my body seemed to hurt, and when I tried to move to ease the pain I found I was stuck and couldn't move, only able to twist my head a little each side. It came back to me. I'd hidden under the car. How I got there in the dark I don't know, because getting out in the daylight seemed an impossible task. This car was so low, I must have poured myself under it last night. Eventually wriggling and squeezing I got outside, thanking Loverboy for keeping the underneath of his car clean of grease and oil. Apart from some dull pain, I felt pretty good. That forced rest last night had set me up well for the new day, even making me think I should sleep that way more often. It was certainly secure. No burly black uniform would think someone was sleeping in the confined place. Still no sign of anyone around me, and I remembered how long I'd been at the overpass and seen no other traffic, so I decided to get moving first and stop later for food. Fuel gauge hardly off full when I started. I'd wasted so much time yesterday and hardly moved toward my quest, instead getting sucked into time-wasting side quests. I had to focus on my core quest now. Interesting diversions could wait until I had Kathy by my side and we could solve them together. Mile after mile and no one else moving at all. I always followed any sign that said freight bypass. Doing that took me away from town centers and made it less likely for me to be seen. When I stopped for food, I noticed that I had used as much fuel this morning as I used all yesterday. While I ate a can of beans and packet of chocolate, I worked on getting batteries into the old radio I'd found. It might be old, but it seemed to work well. The AM band mainly static. FM had one station with music, but for as long as I listened it was only tune after tune, no voice at all. There were two short-wave bands that were full of static from end to end, and there were some raucous noises coming from two places on the dial, but definitely no speaking. I remembered that these sort of radios worked better at night, so I left it to try again later. The route took me into some hills, the highway getting narrower and the car struggling to get up the slopes. I knew I had to move it to a lower gear, but while I could make a reasonable go at getting it up from first up to fifth, getting it down from fifth to fourth gear just didn't want to work. Every time I tried, the gears made grinding noises and I ended up waiting until the car stopped and then started up the gears from first again. Certainly not the best way, but it was working. The narrow roads and the many turns through the hills made me think it would be a great place to set up an ambush against those trucks. If I could stop the last truck in the string just as it went around a sharp corner, no one would know it had been stopped. The more I thought about it, the more I realized it would work backward. This was a great place for them to ambush me. I couldn't see what was around those corners either. After that realization, I stopped and got out another energy drink to get me more alert and set off slower, looking for signs of trouble on all sides as I drove. The highway stayed narrower even though I had passed the main hills. It was now like a backcountry road. Well, not that small, but compared to what I had driven through before, it was smaller. Towns had stopped too. I suppose I was heading more to the interior of the country and most people lived and worked around the edges. When I saw settlements, they were very small, maybe a fuel stop or two, usually with a diner sign high, and I did see some people outside too. I always slowed, but one good look at their ambling gait kept me moving on.